oh cool, we are able to log in into the WhatsApp without doing anything. All the features like either your message is sent or delivered or have read by the person, or what is the last seen, is the person online or not. When you send your message to your partner, that message is encrypted completely. What it meant by, no one can basically read your message in between this entire process that happens. You have to share your public key with each other. Welcome back to Check the System Design series. I am Chirag Goel, and today we are going to talk about a very interesting interview problem statement. Can you draw the architecture or the system design of real world app like WhatsApp, Discord, Line, Google Hangout, right? With WeChat, we have Facebook Messenger, any kind of real chatting application. Can you draw the architecture or the system design? So today we are going to talk about very interesting thing like how this one-to-one communication works, how a QR-based login basically works, how a real-time application communication happens basically, right? Also, we are going to talk about offline support. When you open the WhatsApp basically and you see a lot of offline support is there, like your messages are still persistent, right? And you can do a QR-based login on your WhatsApp, web-based WhatsApp. So a lot more interesting thing that we are going to cover in this episode. So keep watching this episode till the end. You are going to rock it. Let's quickly see what are the things which are expected in a system design interview. Like if someone is asking you about can you design the system design of a WhatsApp in terms of the HLD and the LLD. So what is expected in terms of, like, we will start with the requirement. We are going to cover the requirement in terms of functional, non-functional requirement. Then we are going to cover up on the like scoping. Like we can think of so many features in a WhatsApp, but we cannot basically implement all of them in a given interval in an interview, right? So maybe you are thinking about auth, you are thinking about chatting, right? You are thinking about calling, notification, lot more feature, but we have to somewhere prioritize them. Then we will be talking about like tech stack. If we have to implement this, what are the depending on what are the prioritized things that we have, we will be deciding the tech stack in order to solve that particular problem. Then we will move into the component architecture. We will be talking about routing, how what are the different components that will be required over here, and finally it will come to the protocol, like what kind of protocol we need in order to basically have this real-time communication, and lot more in terms of the implementation, the security part of it, and lot more things are going to be covered. So let's start with very fundamental thing, which is let's have some requirement. Like let's have that discussion and get started. When it comes to WhatsApp, so this is the screen that everyone might have seen, right? So definitely have seen the QR based login. Like whenever you wanted to open the WhatsApp on the web, so you have to basically do a QR scan from your mobile, and finally you are able to log in. So in terms of requirement, we will be talking about like the how the QR based thing works. And if we talk about the overall, what are the things basically apart from the auth, we have this chatting mechanism. Like you can do one-to-one communication with any one of them, right? You can have a group chatting as well available. So this group chatting is also available. So you have this one-to-one communication if you wanted to do like in this particular case, if say suppose this is my one-to-one communication, or this is one-to-one communication, or if there are certain groups probably which I might have, right? So those kind of feature and functionality is something that we need. And there is a, say suppose search basically we can see over here, like there are certain filters that we can have over here. There are archive, like you wanted to archive some of the chat so that it is available for future perspective. And there are a lot more things, like you can do a video and audio calling if you go into each of one them, maybe as in one-to-one or maybe in the group, right? There are other kind of things. Whenever someone is like having a chat, there can be some notification, right? And there are other cool stuff probably we can discuss, like either the person have seen the message or it is delivered or not, right? Such kind of feature and functionality which are expected in terms of the any like WhatsApp or the real kind chatting application basically. So let's jot down the functional and the non-functional requirement, and from there we'll dive into more into the implementation and code. Generally, when it comes to any of the functional requirement, so make sure you are first thinking in terms of the module, and then basically you are thinking about the feature level in each of those modules. So in case of WhatsApp or any of these real-time chat application, one thing is definitely you need a auth. Either that auth is in terms of like OTP based, or it is email based login, or a single sign on, or a QR based login. It can be any sort of, but some auth is basically required in order to get enrolled into the application. Then definitely the chat is something which is very important feature over here. We'll drill down like what kind of chat basically you can have. Again, the other kind of calling, like you can have audio calling, video calling. This is the another grouping, like main module of the chatting application basically, right? And then you have certain notification. There can be a lot more other modules, but we won't be drilling into all of them. Let's talk about the feature level. So if we talk about like auth based, right? In auth based, basically one thing is definitely which comes to especially for the web-based, which is QR-based login, web login, and we will be talking about this. Second can be like your OTP based. It can be maybe like single sign-on. You wanted to log in on WhatsApp using your Facebook or other accounts basically. And then it comes to when it comes to chat. The chat is very important, like one-to-one communication. One-to-one. We'll talk about very interesting part when it comes to the security, especially when we have one-to-one communication. Like you are trying to send your message to your like partner or girlfriend or a boyfriend, and suddenly it goes to your ex, right? You can think of the impact it can create. Or you are sending something to your BFF and it actually ended up into your partner, right? So, or your parent, right? So you can think of the impact if the security or one-to-one communication or the encryption is not happening properly. So think about like you are chatting and someone is able to read the chat between two parties which is happening, and you can think of the kind of communication and the chat basically we have on the WhatsApp, right? So those kind of one-to-one communication and encryption we'll be talking about. Then one of the famous thing in chatting is like group. Like everyone has family groups, right? Everyone have their college or their, you can say, professional network group where they chit chat, have some fun and lot of stuff. Definitely we have something called chat history also, because when there is a chat, there is a history that you can always go through. There is a search, basically we can think of like you can search users or you can search something in the chat history as well, right? So we have global kind of search. Basically you can think of what all other things we have. There are other things which are important when we talk about chat. We do have the media support in terms of image, in terms of audio or video. Like we can send the audio video kind of thing when we talk about the chat, right? There can be n number of other feature and functionality, but for our discussion we'll scope it over here. What else we can think of? As we talked about calling, in calling, two major things which comes with the audio support and the video support. What else in terms of notification? Like it is not just about the push notification. There are other kind of notifying or acknowledgement basically that we need. One is push, like you are away from your system and you are on the some different screen, or if you are on a mobile, you are not using basically that particular application, you get a push notification, right? So those kind of notification basically we will be talking about. Then either your message is sent, delivered or not, right? Which is important. Then finally either your message is read by the someone or recipient or not, which is important, because most of the time when we are chatting and we are literally seeking for a response from someone, right? We keep on peeping into in order to understand if someone have read my message or not, if my message is delivered or not, which is very very important. And sometimes when we want to chat with someone, we wanted to see if someone is actually there and not replying. We are very eager in order to see if the person is online or not, right? And similarly, when was the person online, sometimes that is also very crucial when we wanted to eagerly chat with someone, right? That happens. And sometimes, like, this is another very cool and important feature to think about. If someone have read, right, if someone is typing, say suppose a big message, and there will be some time, if there is no indicator if the person is typing or not, you can think of the panic or the curiosity you may be having, like person is not replying, but actually the person is typing in order to reply, but the message or the content was good enough, that's why it took some time. So those kind of cool features basically we can think of. And these are the overall functional thing that we can talk about in terms of the module and in terms of the feature level. There are so many other things, but to get started with, like, whenever you are discussing, whenever you're talking about, especially in interview, do check if you are going in the right direction. Do you want to include each of these things or not? Do you want to focus on a particular module or not, right? These kind of things, like this one-to-one communication or acknowledgement from the interviewer is also important, because you have a certain limited time. You cannot go in depth in each and everything. So you have to take a hint from the interviewer, like what the person is keen into and what a person want you to dive more into, or wanted to have more attention span. Now when it comes to the non-functional requirement, there are certain things that you should always discuss, which is either you are building for mobile or you are building for desktop, what kind of device basically you are building for, right? Which is very very important. Then depending on the device, if you are making it, say suppose desktop and the mobile capable, where you can open this in the mobile web as well, so maybe the responsive is something which is important. So then it comes to optimization basically. So there can be multiple kind of optimizations. So these optimizations can be in terms of the asset optimization, like the things which are being loaded, like your images, your videos, your audios, right? The chunks, the JavaScript, the CSS basically that need to be sent. There can be network optimization as well. When we talk about network optimization, how soon, how faster basically we can render certain things, right? Which is also very, very important. Okay, so what else basically comes to our mind? One is then there is a security things basically which comes, right? When we talk about security, there are a lot of things. Like what if someone else is basically able to peep into the your messages, right? So which is encryption, decryption, which is very important. Then talking about what if someone else injected some script into your browser and a person is able to hack your account or access your account, right? Those kind of security. What if someone is actually bombarding a lot of requests onto the WhatsApp server, where the WhatsApp server is crashed, right? DDoS impact. There can be a number of security. We will be talking about some of the encryption related security. We will be talking about a couple of more interesting thing in the upcoming you can say episode. Let's keep going. So with this, we have security. The other important thing which comes is the real time. Like either your application is real time, where like you are chatting and the person is able to see, and there is a dual connection, basically duplex connection, and you are able to communicate on the real time instead of you always doing a refresh coming back, and that makes it very tedious, right? That is kind of a like real time support basically. We can think of offline support in terms of if the message, the chat basically that you had, what about when you come back, right? Are those chat lost or something you are able to retrieve and able to see from then and there? What about PWA, like progressive web app? What it meant by, if you are able to like access your web app, or you can say mobile app basically in the browser, just by one click, like it comes, your browser app or browser web application is able to be accessible just like another mobile apps, right? So those kind of PWAs basically are you thinking about? Are you thinking about caching, right? Are you thinking about localization, because there are multiple people who will be using the web app or these kind of chatting application from different local, right? Or different countries, different language they wanted to think about, right? Are you thinking about internationalization in terms of the time zones comes into the picture, in terms of the currencies, because there is a payment feature we didn't talk about, right? Eventually we'll be talking about this payment in some of the other system design. We will be totally diving into the payment section of that. Okay, so let's think about what other portion can be. There can be a lot of things, like there can be versioning, there can be CI/CD, right? There are so many things basically we can talk about in the non-functional realm. But again, you have to basically touch and check with your interviewer if a person is looking into all of them, or probably we will be jumping into some of them, and we have to prioritize. But you can always go and check if these things are something where your interviewer is interested in. So yeah, with this we have good enough list basically. From there we will be talking about, we will be prioritizing, and we will be seeing what all basically we can do. Till now what we have done, we have written all the functional, non-functional requirement, right? So now it's time to discuss with the interviewer, like out of these, what are the things that you want me to dive more in detail. So in this episode basically, say suppose I'm the interviewer also. So what we are going to talk about, let's see what are the things that we wanted to do, as we are mostly keen on the website of thing. So what we are saying, okay, I need this feature as well. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we need QR based login. Okay, what else? OTP based or SSO, we can discuss in the upcoming episodes in some of the other system design. Maybe this time let's talk about one-to-one, because we wanted to understand more on the encryption side of thing. Chat history search we have covered in other system design. Probably let's not cover the audio video calling kind of streaming, that is also covered in some of them. push notification will create something dedicated. Okay, now this is very interesting. Like we there should be some send and recipient, like how does that particular thing travels and how these things are basically stored, kind of thing. We will talk about that. Last seen, how it works. Basically this is kind of a real time thing that happens. So these are the things that definitely we wanted to dive more. So these are the functional requirement we will be talking about, we will be touching upon. And like you should discuss about with your interviewer also, like what are the interested area or the functional requirement he want you to dive into. So talking about non-functional requirement, as it is like WhatsApp real-time application, definitely makes sense. We will be talking about offline. Yes, we always wanted to store some data so that it becomes like very easy when you wanted to access it back. You don't want it to reload the data from server every time, right? The odd side of thing, yes, we are interested because the encryption part, which is very very important in these kind of personal one-to-one or the group messaging. So those kind of encryption we'll be talking about. What else we can cover? Maybe something on the security side of thing also we can talk about, and we can cover on that. So now we have freezed our scope. What are the things that we are going to cover? Let's go into the detail of each and everything and see how these things are implemented basically. In order to understand how the features like either your message is sent or delivered or have read by the person, or what is the last seen, is the person online or not, or you wanted to understand if a person is typing or not. If you have to build these kind of feature before diving into the real time, how this real time things works basically, let's try to understand what are the different protocol, and we'll have a quick glimpses on the different protocols basically, which helps us to get the data from the server, right? So these protocols help us communication between two different surfaces. In our case, what are those surfaces? It is the client and the server. Client, it can be your mobile or the web basically, browser basically, and your server can be any of your server. There can be other ways also communication between server to server, which we are not going to cover. We are going to talk about the client and the server communication. So let's get started. So coming to the first one is polling, how you can get the data like frequently from the server. Second is long polling. Third is server sent event, and the fourth is WebSocket. So let's quickly dive into each one of them one by one. Okay. So let's talk about polling. How this polling works. What it meant by, so say suppose there are certain messages that we have, and there are certain messages that there may be on the server. Like there are certain things which are updated. So two friends are basically chatting. You are chatting with your partner. You have some message. You type something. You did send message. That message basically sent to the server, and basically somewhere it is there in the server, right? We'll talk about how this works and all more detail, but let's try to consider. Generally what we do when we send, it gets stored in the database, and the other person basically wanted to know if there are new data or the messages for him. What the person will do? Person will basically make a request and get the data. Now as we are chatting, we have to do this thing very frequently. Reason being simple, we wanted to know the latest message, latest update on your mobile or the web as soon as possible without doing a reload. So for that, what you will be doing, you will be doing a polling. What it meant by, you will make a request on the server, and once you make a request, if there is no new message, you will get no, like you won't get any response from the server, and finally your connection will be closed. What it meant by, you just ask the server, is there any new data? If there is no new data, the server will respond with no. If there is a new data on the server will respond with the yes, and return the new messages altogether. So this will keep on happening. This is called a polling, basically pinging, right? You are asking, okay, is there someone at the door? Did I? So it's as simple as like you have some mailing or the mailbox basically. If you have to check if there is some certain new mails, what do? You go to the society gate, or you go at the mailing box, and you keep on checking if there is a new message, if there is a new message, right? That is kind of a polling. Every time after certain interval, you go check if there is a message or not. If there is no message, bye bye. If there is a new message, basically you show that new message to the user. That is how your long polling this is how your polling basically works. Okay, so we are polling depending on if you have message or not, we show that. It comes with a cost in a sense. You're unnecessary pinging and overutilizing your resources, where even there is no message altogether, there is no one communicating with you, you are actually pinging and asking your server, do you have something, do you have something, do you have something, right? And that is something which is going to kill your resources. Now one thing to note, it works on HTTP, which is very very important. We will be talking about why this is important. So HTTPS is for the security, and HTTP is basically for the normal one. Okay, let's talk about this. Is not going to work because this is overkilling, and definitely you are just burdening your server by pinging so many times even there is no message, right? Now what about the next? There is something called, which is called long polling. Let's try to understand what this long polling is. In case of long polling, the client basically sends a request and it waits for a long time, and once there is a message on the server, that message is basically returned to the client, and the client basically shows that message to the end user. Like, you will be able to see that message. So you have to understand that request is held on the server for a very long interval, and once that is basically resolved, then you get the response. It is as similar as you have sent someone to get some package or the parcel from the door, and the person is standing on the door until unless that parcel is received. So once the parcel is received, the person brings back that parcel and basically provides you. Now, the problem is, if you want to do more work, right, you can't do, because the person is standing outside. It's as similar as, also you can consider, there's a Swiggy person who went to the restaurant. He's waiting, okay, once my order is basically complete, I will basically take it. But again, with these kind of approach, there is always a timeout approach. What it meant by, a person will wait for maximum, or this request will wait for a maximum certain time interval. It is not going to wait forever. So those kind of interval are always there. Like, you wanted to wait for 60 seconds, or you wanted to wait for like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, like how long you wanted to basically wait. So these kind of requests are again served on the HTTP or HTTPS basically for the security. Now, again, the problem is, your server is actually holding so many requests, so many threads are basically being consumed on the server, and server is not able to do other work on that particular duration because this request is held on the server. Again, that comes with the cost. You are not making multiple calls over here, but you can think of, like, outside your restaurant, outside the door, you have so many people crowded, right? Definitely the small request or the new request that you could have served, you won't be able to, because the place is very much crowded. So same thing happens with the long polling. Now, do we have a better way? Let's talk about it. There is something called server sent event. So what it meant by, so in this particular case, there is a strategy which is used. Your client basically makes a connection with your server, and once this connection is made, what it does, it keeps on sending the event basically to the client. So your client will always keep on getting, if there is a new request basically coming to the server, and this is how basically it works. Now, the problem with this is, this also can serve our purpose, right? But this is not used in, especially in case of when we wanted to have real kind of chatting. This generally works when we wanted to have something kind of notification, like you do some operation, you do some activity, and you wanted to notify other people basically who are away, or you wanted to communicate certain messaging over there. But why this is not going to work? Because you want lot more thing, right? You want security, you want end-to-end encryption also. It's not just sending this message to the other person, also you wanted to send this message in a secured fashion to the other person. So like, the single HTTP based connection again doesn't work, because you are making n number of those connections and you are holding those connections again, and both the person have to make those connections. Now, this works on HTTP, and this is again like one-way communication mostly that happens. In SSE, there's a two-way, but this two-way is not for the real-time communication that we wanted to have. What we have solution for that? We have web sockets for that. So if you have not heard about it, so basically how it works in a simple fashion. So it use a simple strategy, which is, it used a handshake mechanism. Like, first it will go from the client to the server, it will make a HTTP request, it will do a handshake, like, dude, we wanted to have a communication, and like, is it all set for it? Like, the server responds and they acknowledge, yeah, we are okay with the upcoming request and the communication, and the server is up with the acknowledgement. This is the handshake basically will happen. Now, once this handshake has happened, the client and server can do a bi-directional messaging. What it meant by, in case of SEC, what we talked about, now the request basically, the new event will always come from server to the client. There is no control in terms of how your client, the new request which is going to be from client to server, because this is something one-time connection, and your server is equipped to send the request to the client. But in case of WebSocket, now there is a bi-directional messaging that can happen, which is, once the HTTP handshake happened. Now the TCP based connection will basically used in order to do this bi-directional messaging. So anything the client one basically sends, it will go to the server. If there is a new update on the server, it will automatically flow to the client. So these kind of bi-directional messaging happen, and that happens using the protocol which is WS. For the security purpose, it is WSS, right? So now for real time application, we use WebSocket. The WebSocket basically works in most of the scenarios, but again there are a lot more fallback mechanism in the production application where people use strategy of like long polling sometime or the normal polling in case the WebSocket doesn't work or WebSocket basically fails, or especially they make the HTTP handshake if there is a disconnection between the network and the handshake or the communication that was happening goes for a toss. So in real application, in real world application, lot more things, complex approaches are taken instead of just relying on the one approach which is WebSocket, and which makes it bit complex where you use combination of multiple stuff in order to have the reliability basically. So once, okay, we have talked about these communication protocol, let's dive more into understanding how this entire communication happen between user 1 and user 2 in order to understand the encryption and the other complex part, like how the scene things basically works, how this typing is basically notified to the other user. Let's drill into that. Let's understand like how this entire communication flow happens, right, between you and your partner, right? You are having a chit chat, right? So let's understand this flow. Then you will be able to understand these features that we talked about, like features like how the sent received works, how last seen online status or the typing status basically work. In order to understand, let's understand this communication in terms of the WhatsApp. So now first thing first, which is WhatsApp does not store any of your message information or your data basically on the server. Like whatever you're chatting, it does not store that on the server at all until unless you are offline. So we'll be talking about more on that. What it meant by whenever you are sending some message as in user A, it directly from the server, it actually goes to user B, like your partner. It does not store anywhere in the database. It will only store in case you are not online and you are offline, and that too it will store for a very small duration like 30 days or something, and after that it will, your data will be removed from the WhatsApp server. So the retention of the data is not for a longer duration. That's how basically it works. Now try to understand in more depth basically what happens generally. So whenever user A, like you are basically sending a message, you send a message, basically it goes to some server. It definitely goes to the ELB and all whatnot, but let's check that it goes to the server, it goes to the chat server basically. Now you have just sent the message, right? And it can be in any format. Now this message basically gets a ID generator where you get a unique identifier added to it that goes through the messaging sync queue. Basically what it meant by, there are multiple messages which are coming, basically multiple chat IDs which are generated. Now it passes through a queue, and when it is basically passing through a queue, it stores that information. What is that information? It is store the information in a key pair value, especially related to the ID that is being generated over here, like the unique identifier, what, who as an user, what kind of a message basically is being sent, but actual message is not stored over here, which is very important to understand. So that is being stored. Now once the messages are basically stored in view using this queue, what it does, it checks if a user is online using the duplex connection that we talked about using the WebSocket. If the user is online, what it does, it basically takes that message to the user, and finally that user is basically able to see the message. What if this message was not this user was not online? In that particular case, it goes to the different server, which basically helps in two ways. One, to persist that information. Second, it also helps to do a push notification. Like you don't get the push notification for the messages that you are able to read when you are online. Those kind of messages are never shown as a push notification. The messages are only shown when you are offline, you are not on the app basically. Those kind of things are basically done. So those kind of things are handled basically, that too for a very short interval. Like push notification happens then and there, but the retention of your data happens only for basically, if you have to understand the 30 days, like 30 days retention happens to the data that we have. Now one important thing that we have to understand, how the send is basically driven. Like if the message basically is able to reach to the server, the server acknowledge, okay, I got the message, that's all. Like you get my message is sent. Now the message is delivered. What happens when the message basically goes from this particular flow and your chat server is able to send that message to the user, that is being said as in this is being delivered. Now, whenever a user opens that message, try to read that message, another communication is done from this server, which basically goes to this chat and finally updates this KV, which basically tells, okay, now the message is basically read by the user. Similarly, there are certain things which are done by the like last seen or the offline status. We'll talk about that. But the typing status is again done in the same fashion, where if a user B is basically typing or the user A is basically typing, that information is basically sent to the server, that goes to, that is again stored in the KV store, which talks about, okay, this user is basically typing, and that status is basically stored. Even last seen, when the user last saw, is something which is stored in this particular store, and whenever other user wanted to try and see the data, basically that is being persisted from this particular key store. Now let's also see this, how this online status or last seen is basically actually driven. So because this is very important. If you don't understand the importance of how internally is being done, how we are basically communicating, making requests from client to the server, and how internally server is actually doing that in data transmission, then it becomes problem to actually get the clear picture of how end-to-end thing works. Now, in case of like updating, either you are online or not, when was your last seen, one thing happens behind the scene using the WebSocket, which is a heartbeat, which is a very important concept. What it does, every certain interval, like in some cases it is like 5 seconds, and what it has a heartbeat check. It basically sends a just ping call to the server, which actually notify the status of the user, this user is online, so that it get stored in some database, which in this case most of the time is KV, like keep your value database, where it actually stores and knows, okay, this was the last active status of the user, so that you can also derive the last seen definition from there. Okay, with this we are going to talk very interesting topic, which is we see this, how this feature and the functionality basically is driven. Let's talk about some more cool thing, which is like if you have to do the QR based login, like how basically that works. Let's quickly see that. Let's see how this magic happens basically, right? When we talk about QR based login, so like we are able to see in the browser, like when we hit like web.whatsapp.com, we see this QR code, we open our mobile and we try to scan, and we are able to see, oh cool, we are able to log in into the WhatsApp without doing anything. How this QR based login is basically working behind the scene, not just for the WhatsApp, for any QR based login basically that you see works in the same fashion. So let's try to understand what happens. So what is the first thing that will happen whenever you open this web dot like whatsapp.com, WebSocket connection, the way which we talked about the handshake mechanism, the WebSocket connection is basically created between your client and the server, right? So this is a client and a server, basically that communication happens. So we have three things. We have a browser for this particular entire process, we have a mobile app, and we have a node server basically for the server purpose, right? So we have browser, we have mobile, and we have a node server. Now what we are going to do, when our request is basically made, which is web.whatsapp.com, a request is sent from the browser to the server, where it makes a like WebSocket connection. Once that WebSocket connection is done, what is the next thing that happens, which is it generates a unique identifier. It creates a unique identifier for you, which talks about like your browser and lot more thing information it has inside that. Now with that token, your client basically generates a unique QR, like you have a unique code, so you get this QR code generated out of that. Now, this QR code doesn't have anything special. It just have that unique ID which was generated from the server. It is the representation of that particular unique ID. Now, what happens basically? You have to understand. You are on your mobile. On your mobile, basically, you are logged in. When we say logged in, either using OTP, or you are using some Facebook authentication in order to log in on the WhatsApp. So say suppose on your mobile you are logged in. What it meant by, you have the token, the token from the WhatsApp or the Facebook basically, which is you have the your own credentials token on your mobile, right? That is being generated. That is clear. You are logged in on your mobile. What you are doing from your mobile, you are actually scanning this QR code, which is this QR code you are scanning. So when you scan this QR code, what happens? You actually get the unique ID which was hidden behind this QR code. Cool. So what you are saying, this is a browser, this is a the the you can say whatsapp.com place where I trust and I actually want this place to be logged in with my credentials. So what happens basically when you scan, you get this unique ID like captured from this particular captcha. And what is happening, you are sending this unique ID with your access token that you are having as an because you are logged in, right? You are having a Facebook access token and you got the unique identity. You send this unique identity and the access token to the server. What server is going to do? Server is going to leverage the information that you have sent, which will send the Facebook access token to your WebSocket. So the server is basically going to return, because how this is going to return, because there is a dual connection that you have set up between the browser and the server, which is WebSocket connection. So now your server is also equipped to send you the message from the server to the client. That's why once the scanning is done, it got to know, okay, for this unique identity token for which it has created a WebSocket connection, oh, this is a user or this is a Facebook token basically that need to be sent. So that token is basically sent to your browser, and finally you get your user information and you are able to show the user your chat and rest everything comes into the place, because how you are able to get the access token of the Facebook. And how did you got? Is just by doing a scan where the main crux over here are two part you have to understand. One, there's a dual connection which was happened, which ensured like your server is also able to send you the message from the server to the client. Second, when you scan, an important thing happened, which is your unique ID which was there on your QR code and the Facebook access token both got associated on the server once this QR code scanning is done. So your server knows, okay, for this particular unique token or token access token basically that was generated, I need to club it with the unique ID. So that clubbing is done over here so that it knows, okay, you are the same user which you are on the mobile, and you are able to access that information over here. With this, you are actually able to do a QR based login, and that happens for all the kind of application. This is how basically the association between your web and your mobile using just a scan happens. So I hope this you find this interesting, and try to do that and try to observe the request which is going from your browser to the server in order to understand this in more detail. When it comes to one-to-one communication, then there is always a fear of, can what if someone else can read my message, right? That question must come. So that is basically tackled by using the end-to-end encryption. So what it meant by, so as we have seen in this diagram, whenever a user A, like when you send your message to your partner, that message is encrypted completely. What it meant by, no one can basically read your message in between this entire process that happens. Even we talked about sometimes your messages are stored because you are offline. Those messages are also encrypted. No one, even servers wanted to basically try to encrypt your message or basically decrypt your message, they can't. So even your messages which are stored on the server are fully saved and secure. How basically this entire thing works, we have to understand few fundamental, and then we will be talking about the website of encryption as well, so which is very cool. So let's understand very fundamental terminologies for encryption and decryption, and from there we'll latch into how you can achieve the advanced thing on the website as well. Okay, for this, as we talked about, we have user A and user B, and there is a communication between happening between user A and B. So there one thing that comes to our mind, which is, what if I have some key and the same key basically is there with the user B, so that we know how to unlock this particular stuff, right? As simple as, like, you are having a box and that box is having two key, one you are having and your partner is having. When you have to send this courier, what you will do, you will ask anyone, like you will ask a courier boy, you will ask a Denjo, Zepto, or any of these medium, or you can do the Rapido, right? You send this box to the other person. Even the person in between try to access that, the person won't be able to do that, because the keys are basically with the two people, which is a sender and the receiver. That is one way, and that basically way is called symmetric encryption. What it meant by, you have a normal text and you have a key. So before actually sending that data, you encrypt that data, and that becomes basically a ciphertext, so which a normal person can't basically read and interrupt. And similarly, on the other side, your partner is basically having a secret key again, which is the same key, and a person is able to unbox you open the box basically and retrieve the parcel or the text basically that you have sent, right? That is one way of doing it. But again, that is not the best and the ideal way, because again, what if that key is lost or leaked, because you are having single key basically, which is the source of truth for the encryption and the decryption both. So in the modern world, what people have done, they have something more advanced, which is called the asymmetric encryption. This is very interesting. Keep an eye on this, because we are going to talk about this for the web also, and this is very, very famous in most of the places. This asymmetric encryption and decryption is basically used. What it has two things. It has something called public key and it has something called private key, which is very interesting concept. What it meant by, whenever something is being sent over here, it gets encrypted by the public key of the other person. Try to understand, and we will be also try to understand from the some diagrammatic and representation. Hopefully you will be able to get that. So first, your data is basically encrypted using a public key. This public key is of the person to whom you are sending this package, right? And finally this becomes a ciphertext, which is encoded data. Now this encoded data is decoded using simple mechanism. The person has the private key and uses that private key in order to unlock the message basically, which is written inside that, and that becomes a plain text. Now let's try to understand with the real world. Like if you have access to the locker in the bank, there are two keys. One key is always with the master, and second key is like you are holding basically, and in order to unlock that you need both the key. One is the master key, and second is your private key, which is public key you can consider, and the private key, right? Which is just for the example, where you have two keys in order to unlock your box, or you can say the store in the bank. Similar fashion, you have two keys basically which is generated, and let's try to understand in more depth how this key sharing basically happen, who will use whose private key or the public key, which becomes a mess sometimes in order to understand. Let's understand that. Let's understand the asymmetric and end-to-end encryption in more better way. What happens, say suppose you and your partner is going to start the communication. Yeah, how that communication will start, you both will have your private key generated, like you both will have your private keys. So you got your personal private key, your partner will have your personal private key. Now what will happen, both will have a public key as well. Like your partner A, or you and your partner both will have your public key. Now you wanted to have a communication between both other, you have to do one small thing, you have to share your public key with each other. Important, you won't be sharing your private key with each other, you have to share your public key with each other, so that you can encrypt and decrypt the messages which are shared in between. How that works, whenever the WebSocket connection basically happens, whenever in the WhatsApp you say, okay, I know this person, I wanted to receive the message from this person. So basically what happens, you actually share your public key. Now those public key are basically stored in your local devices. For the next time whenever a message is being sent, we use this public key for what, let's see. So what happened, you have the public key of your partner have the public key of your. Similarly, if you have n number of people to whom you are wanted to have this one-to-one communication, your public key and the other person public key are basically exchanged, and those are stored in your system and the other person system. Now you have your private key and the public key of other people whom you wanted to communicate. Simple panda. How it is going to work, next time you wanted to send a message, to your partner, what you are going to do, let's quickly see. You are going to basically, this is a message which is a love letter, probably you wanted to send to your partner. You wanted to ensure it is not being leaked or read by other person. What you are going to use, you are going to use your private key and public key of the other person. Like you have the public key of B, you will use the public key of B and your own private key basically in order to encrypt it, and you will send this message. Cool, you did encrypt the data with the public key of the other person, you encrypted this data. You have encrypted. Now it's time to decrypt. Now this message will go to the other person, which is encrypted using the other person's public key. How it is going to happen, a small thing. In order to leverage or unread this message, person B will use his private key in order to unlock this message, which was encrypted via the public key of this person only. So as simple as, in order to unlock anything, this message should be encrypted by the public key of that own person. So if your partner or your friend, your XYZ colleague basically wanted to unlock this message, simple thing, The person should have his private key, and the message should be encrypted using the public key of the same person. So in this particular case, user B wanted to unlock or decrypt the message. So this message was also encrypted using the public key of user B only. Hence, a person can decrypt that. Now the interesting part is all kind of this encryption and decryption happen behind the scene, but mostly these used to happen on the backend side on the browser earlier. But now the more capabilities has come to the browser. Browser have very cool thing in order to do this encryption and decryption and creating this public and private key and sharing between the people, doing unlocking this. That actually avoids a lot of load on your server. How this is done? Let's check it out. If you are a web developer, this is a very powerful API that you have, right? It helps you to generate the unique identifier. It helps to do the end-to-end encryption and a lot more. So just to avoid the confusion, this is not a crypto API, the cryptocurrency that we are talking about. This is cryptography API. So there's a difference. Okay, let's talk about what the power that basically we get from this web API. This web API is called the crypto. It provides you something called Septel. What it meant by it provides a low level in cryptographic primitives. It helps you to generate some keys, it helps you to encode the code, and it helps you to sign something and verify if that is proper valid data or not. It helps you with lot more power. Let's quickly see what it provides. One, it has certain limitation, it has certain benefits also. Let's talk about like in what scenarios it is going to work. First, if you wanted to use this in order to do an end-to-end encryption for encrypting and decrypting, you have to be, your application has to be HTTPS. Like if it is HTTP, sorry, it won't work. Now the other thing is you have to deal with the binary data. Like if you are not about Unicode uni data, basically you have to basically use. So the binary data basically is very important in this particular case. Then it provides you a lot of generic API using which encryption, decryption, unique ID generation, like lot more thing basically happens. And whenever you operate with those APIs, you always get most of the cases you get a promise back where you can take a decision. Okay, once this encryption or decryption is done, you wanted to achieve something and you wanted to do something, you wanted to make a network call or whatever it is, right? So these are something that you get as in power, and these are certain limitations also. Sometimes like HTTPS, you have to work with the binary data. You have to always ensure you are converting into the binary format before sending the data to the server and whatnot, right? With this, let's try to understand and explore more like how this entire like cryptography works on the web. In order to understand this, let's drill down into the certain areas which are very important. So how this entire encryption and decryption works on the browser, let's try to understand. First, what we are going to do, we have to generate a unique key. Like what it meant by we are going to do key generation are basically done by, like as we talked about, it is like you can do in both the ways, symmetric and asymmetric way, but for the more security perspective, what we are going to do asymmetric, where you have your public and the private key generated. Perfect. So how it is going to work, we are using this key generation, we are going to generate a public and the private key, then we are going to derive key. What it meant by it helps you to own, like we will be using our own private key and others public key in order to generate a unique identifier or the key which will be sent to someone, and that key basically will be used in order to again like decrypt. So like this combination is used to encrypt, and similar kind of like key will be used on the other side in order to decrypt. So these kind of thing will happen using the derived key. So there are two things: you generate a key and you basically generate a unique key using the own private and the others private key that will be used for your encryption and decryption, right? So there are two important things that we have to understand. Public and private key of your are generated, and you have derived a key using your own private key and the public key of other. You have a derived key and you have your public and private key. With this, what you have to do, you have to encrypt that message. How you are going to encrypt? Very important. You have to get the like encoded message, the text basically that you are going to encode. The algorithm, again, like there are multiple algorithm. What algorithm you are going to use in order to encrypt? There are plethora of like well-tested algorithm that they have exposed. You can use any one of them. I can also share what are the recommended one. Then you need a initialization vector, which is also very important. Like apart from this private and public key, do you wanted to always generate a new hash or random key? Basically, if you attach and use that in your algorithm, it will make your algorithm more stronger, right? and you use your derived key. And when we say this derived key is equivalent to the combination that we discussed, which is private key of your and the public key of others. Using this, you have always a derived key. Using this entire combination, algorithm, initialization vector, and a derived key, you encode your message. And the message basically need to be in binary format as we discussed. Now this encryption is done. Boom. Now you have encrypted, your message is ready to be sent to the other person. Now, will the other person will be able to see your message or not? The person can't until unless has certain things. What are those? The other person, your friend, gets the data in the binary format. As we said, it is very important. Second, the person have to use the same algorithm, and that is okay because you are shipping your application is basically available on both the places. Then you know what algorithm basically is used. Now, initialization vector is something that need to be shared. Most of the time people prefer sharing this initialization vector along with the data basically, or the message which is being communicated. Now, one thing is recommended, people don't use the same initialization vector for all the messaging. For every message which is basically sent, they use the unique generated initialization vector, which makes it more powerful. In order, even it is leaked like initialization vector in one of your message, every message has something new, right? So that way it makes more stronger. And a derived key is again used in the same fashion, where again repeating it, which is you have your own private key and the public key of other. Using this combination, basically you generate a derived key, right? Using, now you are able to decrypt this message, and this is how the entire web-based encryption and decryption going to work. Now let's peep into what are the APIs which are exposed by the crypto, right? And we talked about Septel, and we'll have some glimpses, right? If you are interested, I will be sharing detailed documentation and a link, a GitHub repo, which I found very interesting, in the comment. You can go, you can try out, you can experiment also, and that will be helpful. Let's quickly have a glimpses of the snapshot if you wanted to try out how this is going to work end to end, right? As we talked about, there is a first phase which is called like key generation. Second is you are going to derive that key, and the third phase is basically which is you will encrypt, and finally you are going to decrypt that message. So let's quickly see how this encryption decryption entire thing is going to work. So first comes your encryption, first comes your key generation phase. So let's quickly see how this key generation phase is going to work. As we said, we are going to generate a public and private key. How that is generated, let's quickly look into that, which is there is a method which is called generate key. This generate key takes certain things, which takes the algorithm, it takes again the curve, which is the precision, all sort of thing. It takes either you want this the key which is generated to be read again, or it can be accessible. For that you pass this particular key which is true, and you basically define for what purpose basically you are generating this particular key. In our case, we are generating this so that it can be used as a derived key, right? So once you use this generate key, you are having a key that will be basically available in two form. This key pair, if you notice, you get a public key and you get a private key. Your public key and private key are generated using this. And how you basically get it, because this you will get in a format, right? You get this data in a format, and that from that format you have to extract that particular key. That's why there is a method which is called export key. Using export key, you will be able to derive your public and the private key. So actually this is what is generating a key, but that has some structure. There are some standard basically which are used in order to generate this key, and the output that you will get in the JSON format, probably that is not much valuable to you. In order to extract the public and private key, we use this export key. So using export, now your public key and the private key are with you. You are ready with your own public and private key. Now there will be message sharing between communication or exchanging of your public key. Now you will be having public key of other people with whom you wanted to communicate, and the rest things will happen. Now what will happen? There is something called which is derived key. In case of derived key, what we discussed, you will be using own private key and the public key of the others. Then you are going to have your own derived key. Let's quickly see how that is basically done. What we do a import key in this particular case, and what it takes, again it talks about what method or standard you are going to use. So the structure in which the key is basically generated over here is JWK, and it talks about you have a public key of the other person, you talked about the algorithm, and you talked about if it can be basically exchanged or not, right? So it can be exported, that is the same thing. Now what, using this import key, what you're doing, you have your public key, you have your private key. Using your public and private key combination, which is your public key, private key, you are going to use your derived key, which is important. It's the same thing, the public private key basically which we got, we are using import in order to get our public and private key in the same format, which is JWK format, so that you can pass that JWK format in the derived key. Like you are doing nothing special. Why we are using this import key? In order to get your public and private key in the JWK format. That's all, right? That's how, because this derived key consumes the same format, it don't take the string. If you pass your public and private key as a string, this derived key doesn't work. What it takes, the algorithm, right? It takes how much length sort of thing you are going to use for encryption and decryption. It takes all those information and your derived key is ready. So finally, this derived key is basically going to use for your encryption purpose. Like you can definitely try it out and the link is shared. Don't worry about that. I just wanted to give you some glimpses. What are these APIs? How these APIs are basically consumed. Just keep an eye. It is going to benefit you when you are going to implement it. Now, we talked about encryption, right? For encryption, what all we needed, if you remember, we need encoded message. Like what message need to be encoded? Algorithm, initialization vector, and a derived key, which we just generated, right? So let's quickly have an eye on that. It's a very easy way to basically encrypt or encode basically any of the data. What it does, it is actually using the we are using a encode method if we see text editor, because as we said, we want this data to be available in the format of the binary. We can convert into that. Second, there is a method which is called encrypt method. If we see, it also comes with the encrypt subtitle encrypt method. One thing which we see, we are going to encrypt this message using like again initialization vector. This initialization vector is something that is need to be passed, which is called IV. You have algorithm, you have a IV, which is initialization vector, which is very important, and you have two other things. What are those things? You have a text, which should be in binary format, and you have a derived key, which is generated just back, right? So you have your derived key, you have your encoded key, which we got from here, and you have your initialization vector, you have your algorithm. Using this four combination, you are able to encrypt your message. Now it's ready to send to your partner. Boom, right? Now your partner receives the message and partner have to decode it. How that is going to work? It is basically you have your binary format message, you have the algorithm, same. You will get the initialization vector from the message, and you will generate the derived key in the format that we discussed. Your partner will also have the derived key generated using the combination of private and public key. Now the person is going to use the decrypt method instead of the encrypt, and rest everything remains the same. If you see, you have the IV, which will be sent as a part of the data you can extract from there. You have the drive key that you generated from your own private key and the public key of your partner, and the unit array, basically the binary format data that you get from your partner, right? Using this, you are able to encrypt, you are able to decrypt, and you have got so much cool capability on the web. Like on your web, you are able to do the damn crazy stuff. Got it? Okay, let's try to implement, and let me know in the comment if you find this something very interesting, and it is way much powerful. If you get this capability, you are going to have very less load, and you are actually getting rid of the any sort of computation that you wanted to do on the server. All those things basically happens on the client to end to end. Basically, it makes things more and more secure. Whoa, what a discussion it was. I love talking about it. I love sharing it. What about you? If you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and like comment like what did you like it, and do let me know in the comment what are the next thing, what are the next system design topics that you want me to cover. Anything specific you want me to cover in detail, maybe I will be very happy to take that up. So feel free to drop the message, share it, make it viral, and see you in the next episode.